Well, I have to say I'm very glad my husband made it back from his meditation minyan he was leading, because the last time I gave this drash, or something sounding very similar to this Devar Torah, was the family service, so it might sound a little familiar to some of you. That husband that I just mentioned, he travels to Northern California for business, not infrequently, working at that Ramah we talked about. And this past Thursday night, he was flying back, so I thought I'd be a good wife and pick him up from the airport. It's really not that far. It's maybe half an hour in traffic. So I thought it'd be a good break from sermon writing, and I get some wife points, so it seemed like a good idea. Now, I picked up this habit from living in LA of not checking the weather before I left. So I was shocked to drive out of my parking deck. We live in an apartment, and it was pouring rain. Okay, fine, I can handle some rain. I grew up in the mid-Atlantic. If you can name the weather, we have it. I can drive in rain, I can drive in snow, I can drive in ice, whatever. But as I was driving, the rain got worse and worse. It was a pounding rain. I kept turning the windshield wipers up and up until they couldn't go any faster. It was dark, and that didn't help. It was so hard to see. And then the roads started flooding. And I'm going to ask really quick if we can maybe just pause on the chairs, Mike and John and I don't know her name. You think we could just like, it's a really short drash. I'm the assistant. They don't even let me talk that long. There's a big cane that's going to come and pull me. If we could, I'm not even kidding. If we could just, no? I tried. I'll talk really fast. No. I already talk fast enough, trust me. Put yourselves back in that car with me. I can't forget it. I really can't. It was dark. And there's a pounding rain. It was hard to see. The roads started to flood. And they weren't like impassively flooding. It's not like I couldn't keep driving. But it was enough water that I was really glad I took my husband's Accord and not my perky little red Corolla. And even on the highway, people were driving really slow. Not because of the traffic. There was no traffic. It was this pouring rain. They had their blinkers on. They were going like 35, 40 miles an hour. Now, when you learn to drive in D.C., and then you move to L.A., you pick up some rather aggressive driving habits. Normally, I'd be sitting behind the wheel just getting more and more frustrated. Look at these guys. They're going 35. There's no traffic. What's wrong with these people? In my inner voice, not out loud. But I was also going 30 under. And I actually noticed when I took a moment to take a breath, I had one hand gripped on the steering wheel, and the other was actually clenched in a fist in my lap. My stomach was clenched. I was actually gritting my teeth in my jaw, and it actually hurt when I took a moment to realize. I live in an apartment. We park our cars across from where we live. We're one floor up. We didn't flood. We lost nothing. We were out of power and water for a few days, internet, but we lost nothing. And I realized in that moment, several weeks afterwards, that I'm still carrying some trauma from Harvey. How much more so for those who lost their homes, their businesses, for people who had to literally swim to safety. I literally can't imagine what that's like. As Mincha winds down, we see Nila beckon. We know that Yom Kippur is coming to an end, and the gates are starting to creak shut. Yom Kippur is a time when we're working towards shleimut. We're working towards wholeness, completeness, and we focus on tshuva, asking forgiveness, as the means by which we accomplish this goal of wholeness. But I would posit that we need more than that to work towards wholeness on this Yom Kippur. We are, all of us, broken in some way by this disaster, by this destruction that's been wreaked upon our city. How do we heal from this brokenness? I've heard a lot of people say, the minute it happened, a lot of people say, well, XYZ happened to me, but it could have been worse. And it's true. it could have been so much worse. Our community suffered physical damage, material damage, but in our community, at least, no lives were lost. And that is something to be truly grateful for, something to thank God for. It could have been so much worse. And yet, by ending the conversation with that note, we stunt our grieving process. It's not even really stunt so much. Denial is a part of the grieving process. And saying, well, my pain isn't really pain because there's this other thing that could have happened, and now that's pain. Saying that doesn't give any room for us to say, but this thing happened, and now I'm different, which is what grief is. It's being a different person than you were before. It's death, yes, it is death of another person, and it's also the death of a phase of life, of the person you were before. And you have to grieve, even if only a little, that person you were before. You have to grieve, even if only a little, for the life you thought you were going to have before the storm. I learned about this when I was interning as a hospital chaplain. People grieve when their loved ones die, yes, and people grieve when they are sick, when they're given a life-altering diagnosis, because they're not going to be the same person they were before the operation or before the chemo. People grieve, even if ever so slightly, when good things happen. When you get married or have a baby, these are good things. We pray for them to happen. We bless others that they should happen to them so they have the same happiness we do. They're good. And you're not exactly the same person after. You're not single anymore. You're a spouse. You're not just a couple. You're parents. And no matter what, you can never go back to being who you were before. And even when that's good, even when it's for a good thing, you have to let that person you were before go. That's just a teensy little bit of grief. So when the largest natural disaster to hit the mainland United States occurs in our city, when hundreds of our families flee for their lives and lose their homes, when our synagogue building has 4 feet of water in the sanctuary, we all need to grieve a little. Even if you didn't flood, even if you didn't lose power, you didn't lose water, you deserve to grieve too. So how do we grieve? We acknowledge it. We verbalize it. We say, I'm angry, or I'm sad, or I'm frustrated, or I'm scared. And we listen when other people say that to us. This is how we heal from hurt. We come together like all of us are today, right now, all of you. We come together so we're not alone when we feel that pain. That's how we heal. We pray and we say what we're grateful for, yes, and we also ask for help. Spiritual care from God, emotional support from our friends, physical and financial support from institutions whose purpose is helping us rebuild our lives. Donald Draper in Mad Men. I was on a Mad Men kick. I just rewatched the whole series. He once said that mourning is just extended self-pity. I love Mad Men. It's a great show. But he's wrong. That's not the Jewish view of mourning. We must mourn. We must grieve in order to heal. Concentrating only on the hurt to the exclusion of gratitude, that is extended self-pity. Concentrating only on the gratitude to the exclusion of the hurt is unhealthy. We must first mourn our losses, grieve the changes in our lives that we never asked for, we wouldn't wish on anyone. We have to mourn first before we can start to move on. It's like sitting Shiva after a loss. A mourner spends a week essentially housebound, inviting other people in to recall their loved one with them, and they sit in that place of sadness and pain, of loss. And then, traditionally, when the week of Shiva is ended, they get up, they replace their torn clothes, they put on real shoes, and they leave the house with a few other people, and they take a walk around the block. They take their first tentative steps to rejoin the world. We too, in our own time, we will rejoin the world. We will rebuild. We will endure. Grief is cyclical, and grief is cumulative. Cyclical meaning you might feel worse at some times than others. You might be moving onward and upward, and then all of a sudden just feel anger or pain or frustration. That's okay. That's normal. Acknowledge it. Grief is cumulative. It's cumulative meaning grief adds up. New grief reminds us of old grief. New trauma reignites old flames that were put out long ago. And that's normal. That's really normal. And if it becomes too much, use the resources available to help you get through it. You wouldn't ignore a toothache, hoping it'll just go away on its own. You wouldn't kick yourself for having a toothache in the first place. You wouldn't try not to pay attention to it because you shouldn't be having a toothache. Other people have worse problems. That's true. They do. And your problem right now is that you have a toothache or whatever. You'd go to the dentist for a toothache, and you should take just as much care of your spiritual, emotional, and mental health. And slowly, steadily, we will be ready to start taking those first few tentative steps around the block after leaving the house. And we'll do this by acknowledging how we're doing, by taking care of ourselves, doing things we love, eating right, exercise, sleeping. These are things we do for our physical health, and they're also how we attend to our mental and emotional health. They're how we heal after hurt. And as we heal, we will rebuild our homes, our businesses, our synagogue building, and our city. We will repay the kindnesses that have been done for us. We will help others in their brokenness so that they might be whole again too. I bless us all that we may on this Yom Kippur day show ourselves the compassion we need to heal, that we may accept help if we need it, which is a sign of strength and not of weakness. I bless us as we continue in our efforts to rebuild our lives and our homes. I bless us all with shlemut, with wholeness, on this Day of Atonement and always. Gamar Chatima Tova, may you all have a year of wholeness, of sweetness, and light. Only good things. Gamar Chatima Tova.